Now, depending on how you feel about sharks, this is either a moment from a nature documentary or a scene from a horror film. Brett Barley, Buxton native, went out on his jet ski to do some fishing, and then when he went out by Cape Point, came across this swarm of sharks.
This Nat Geo moment happening around me, and I just see all these fish and all these sharks. I'm like looking in their eyes as they're going by, and it's super cool to see at the same time.
Catch his whole story about what happened on our website, wavy.com. This is Nick Broadway reporting.
This next clip comes from an Instagram user named Pasha Brill, and it starts off as a simple roadside problem before turning into something much harder to explain. According to Pasha, he was driving through a forested area when he ran over a sharp branch. Just like that, his tire blew out. He had no spare, no signal, there were no other cars, just an empty road surrounded by trees with daylight starting to fade. He begins recording on his phone, even joking about how badly he managed to mess things up. Eventually, he gets a weak signal and calls a friend. Help is coming, but it's about 4 hours away. Let me just interject here. I have a lot of friends that I love very much, but we're gonna have to figure something out before I trek 4 hours to help you change a tire. I'm gonna need you to be a man and figure it out. I digress.
Колесо спущено. За час, который я здесь нахожусь, ни одна машина не проехала. Единственное, что меняется в этой ситуации, то, что начинает темнеть.
Then night fully sets in, and that's when things get a little dicey. There's movement in the bushes, and something runs across the road. At first he assumes it's just an animal, maybe a dog or something local to that area, but then he sees the eyes. Bright, red, reflecting straight back at him in the dark. The figure stops in the road, looks directly at him, then disappears into the trees. That moment changes everything.
Что это за херня была?
He describes the creature as being on all fours, but something about it doesn't look right. The body looks dark, almost bare, hairless, and the movement feels just odd. Instead of staying put, he makes a decision he later regrets. What do you think he did? Yeah, he followed it. Deeper in the woods, those same glowing eyes keep reappearing between the trees. The creature is trying hard not to fully reveal itself. It seems to stay just out of reach, moving, stopping, watching. At one point, it slips behind a tree, and then it's gone.
Работает.
After that, there's nothing left to do but go back and review the footage, trying to figure out what he actually saw. Now, there are a lot of theories. The simplest explanation is that this was some kind of animal with light reflecting off its eyes in a way that made it look super creepy. I mean, maybe even something unexpected like an escaped exotic pet. Of course, not everyone is going to see it that way. I mean, some people have thrown around names like the chupacabra, the rake, even skinwalkers. Honestly, I don't know what it is. It's super creepy, but answer me this. If you were alone, stranded deep in the woods, and something like that was watching you from the dark, I mean, would it really matter what you call it? On January 26, 2026, a video was uploaded that began as a routine hike but quickly turned into a real survival situation. The footage comes from a channel called Trail Off, which typically focuses on hiking and outdoor life across New Zealand. This particular trip takes place in the foothills of the Tararua Range. At the start, it's just normal video. A hiker named Graham moves through dense forest filming as he goes. At one point, he pauses beneath this massive tree, just taking a moment to appreciate the size and atmosphere around him. But in a single step, everything changes. He snags his foot on a root hidden beneath the leaves, stumbles, and there's a sharp snap, followed by immediate pain. He drops to the ground, continues filming, and quickly realizes this isn't something minor.
Well, I'm on the ground right now. I've stepped down onto a root and it's given way, and I've heard a snap either in the root or in my ankle, and now I'm in a bit of pain. So I guess this is a really good opportunity for me to document what I'm doing to get myself out of this situation. I want to be clear, this is not pretend. It's a real life survival situation now where I've hurt myself. I don't know how badly. I've already called loudly for help. No one has heard, and there's every chance that at 2:39 p.m. in the afternoon on a Saturday, there's a chance I might be the last person through this trail for the day.
Even with the pain setting in, he keeps a level head and starts recording again, fully aware that he may now be dealing with a serious situation. At that point, he doesn't really know the full extent of the injury. His adrenaline is pumping. But one thing is already clear. Getting out on his own might not be an option. He tries to call out for help, but nothing. Nothing even resembling a response. It starts to hit home as he processes the reality of where he is.
Basically what I think I have to do is test walking on it a bit. It's real sore. There's a branch fallen further down the track, I'm going to get my stuff, especially my PLB, and get there and get myself situated and reevaluate. Oh, I fell over there. The fuck? Like... Oh.
The trail is deathly quiet, and at that time of the day, there is a very good possibility he's the last person out there. He suspects his ankle may be broken, and he knows that once the adrenaline fades, the pain is going to get worse. As daylight begins to fade, the pressure builds. Time becomes a factor. He carefully tests whether he can put weight on his leg and starts thinking about using his emergency locator beacon. That decision isn't taken lightly. He knows exactly what it means. Before committing to it, he shifts slightly, gathers his gear, and gets himself into a more stable position. After putting on extra layers to stay warm, he continues documenting everything, doing his best to stay calm. Eventually, he manages to reach emergency services using GPS.
Stupid, but the second you see the helicopter, you think, I'm in this clearing. How can you not have seen me?
Then it's just waiting. Time passes, the tension builds, then finally he hears something. A helicopter. Help is close. He tries to signal even though moving is difficult. Rescue crews arrive, lowering themselves through the trees to reach him. After assessing the injury, medics confirm a fracture along the outside of his ankle. Serious but manageable. He's secured into a harness and carefully lifted up through the canopy before being transported to the hospital. Later on, he reflects on the experience. And the takeaway is pretty straightforward. Preparation matters, staying calm matters. And having the right safety equipment can make the difference between a bad situation and a much worse one. Because out there in the jungle, it doesn't take much. Just one step in the wrong spot. On August 18th of 2019, a deeply unsettling situation unfolded in the forests of Portugal. A group of cyclists came across something they weren't expecting. The video was uploaded to a YouTube channel called Animal Shelters Near Me, which focuses on real-life animal rescue stories. In the footage, several cyclists are riding along a forest trail, moving steadily through the trees. Everything is fine. Then one of them slows down. Something off to the side of the trail, near a tree, catches his eye. They stop and look closer. At first, it's not immediately clear what they're seeing, but as the camera moves in, the situation becomes obvious. There's a dog tied to the tree. The rope is pulled so tight that the animal can barely move. It's wrapped around the trunk in a way that keeps the dog almost completely stuck in place. The dog can't properly turn its head, it can't lie down, it's forced to stay standing in the same position. You can see the exhaustion and the fear. It looks like it's been there for a long time. The tone shifts immediately. What started as curiosity turns into concern. Then frustration, because now it's clear this wasn't an accident. Someone put the dog there, left him there on purpose. Without hesitation, one of the cyclists steps forward and starts working on the rope. His hands tremble as he tries to loosen it. Finally, it gives. The moment the dog is free, its body drops slightly, like it's finally able to relax after being held in place for so long. The video was later shared by a Spanish animal rights organization who spoke out strongly against what happened. They pointed out just how cruel it is to leave an animal restrained in a way that prevents even basic movement. And I could not agree more. I mean, this is just unbelievable. This isn't neglect, it's intentional murder. And it's very disturbing. On the flip side though, Moments like this show that, had these cyclists not stopped this situation, we would be having a very different discussion. This unsettling clip comes from a YouTube channel called Moto Wild, known for blending off-road riding with cinematic, suspense-driven storytelling. Most of the footage is shot from a first-person perspective, putting you right in the rider's position as he explores remote trails. The events in this video take place on June 18th, 2025. While riding through a secluded area, he notices something unusual. A man off to the side of the trail appears to be burying something. Instead of passing by, curiosity gets the better of him. He stops, waits, and decides eventually to take a closer look. Once the man leaves the area, the rider approaches the spot and finds a partially damaged bag.
Oh shit, I don't know if I can make it back out. Man, what is inside of this? Oh, it's the bag, man. It's a bag. Got to be careful, maybe it's something expensive that can break. But I just hope it's money. Oh, no, there's not a lot of things inside of this, but it's a bag and we want to know what that is. Gun. There is a lot of hundreds inside of this bag, man. Oh shit, man, that's Coco.
He begins going through it, trying to figure out what's inside. At first, he can't tell, but then things take a turn. Inside the bag is what appears to be a weapon, wrapped in plastic. Along with it, there's something else. Stacks of what look like freshly printed bills, possibly stolen. That's when all hell breaks loose. The man who buried the bag is coming back. He sees the guy, starts running straight toward him. Without wasting a second, the rider grabs the bag, rushes back to his motorcycle, and takes off. No hesitation, he just flies out of there. According to the uploader, the bag and everything inside it were later turned over to the police. Ain't no way I'm turning in that money. But beyond that, there's very little information about what happened next. And that might be the most unsettling part. How does this not make the news? Hard to tell how serious this actually was. I'll tell you what I do know, though. If I ever come across someone burying something in the middle of nowhere, I'm not going to immediately go dig up what he buried. I'm going to wait a little longer. This is such a cool story about a dogman terrorizing a couple in Ohio. I was going to cut it up, but the story is so good, so I'll just put it here. Check this out. The channel is called Exposing the Strange. It's actually really cool. Give this guy a follow. And this story is wild.
Thank you for joining us. Today we are going to speak with Carrie and Greg. They have had encounters with dogmen on their property since 2010, and they are still having encounters today. They were even in Linda Godfrey's book, Real Wolfmen, True Encounters in Modern America. Not only has Carrie seen the dogman on her property, but she also has photos of prints in the snow in her yard, as well as a horrifying picture of the dogman on the roof of her chicken coop looking straight down at her husband Greg, which was taken from a trail cam. So stay tuned. This is a horrifying story, but it's not over yet. And this is an exclusive interview only here on Exposing the Strange. If you have an encounter story that you would like to share regarding cryptids, UFOs, or the paranormal, contact us through our website.
It was back in around March of 2010, and we're just a normal family. and my son was living with us at the time. And he came to me, he was a college student, and he lived upstairs, and he was telling me about how he had been hearing noises at night. Sometimes he would stay up really late at night while he was studying and working on his papers. And I asked him about the noises, and he said that it was like grunting and growling and a lot of brush moving and stuff like that, and he could hear it from his window up in his bedroom. And I just kind of, I don't know, shrugged it off a little bit, thinking, well, it was a deer, it was raccoons, it was, you know, things that we know. So one of the first encounters that I had was early in the morning. I was getting ready for work, and I heard this sound that sounded like a goose outside, and I thought it was one of our geese, because we raised geese at the time. We had ducks and geese and chickens. And so I went outside to check on them to make sure they were okay, and they were okay. And I had 2 dogs at the time, and they were outside with me, but I noticed that they weren't coming with me while I was walking around the yard, and that seemed kind of funny. And then up in the corner of our yard, I started hearing what sounded like a puppy, like a dog that was hurt. And I remembered seeing signs earlier, like the day before, about all these lost pets and stuff. And so I thought it was just like a wounded dog. So I started walking up into the corner of the yard, and it was a very secluded place. It had a lot of bamboo. I couldn't really see, you know, where I heard that the whimpering was coming from. So I was kind of parting a little bit of the bamboo and saying things like, "Here, puppy, puppy, here, puppy, puppy." And then all of a sudden, it's like the whole feeling just changed. And it was like all the hair stood up on my body and the back of my neck. And so all of a sudden, this crashing, whatever was in there started crashing through the bamboo, and I could see the bamboo moving, and it let out this just god-awful growl, snarl kind of thing. And I turned around and I ran. And I didn't think I was going to make it to my house. I thought that whatever it was big enough that I was going to be prey, and my husband was going to find the body when he came home, or maybe not find me at all. And I ran into the house, and I can remember I was so terrified that I literally sat down in the corner of my kitchen, and I was not going to come out. I sobbed. I cried harder than I've ever cried before, because I was just I was terrified. I was scared. The next encounter I had was my son woke me up one night. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and he said that something had gotten one of our chickens. We had a chicken called Lonely Boy, and he free range, so he was out a lot. And so I got up, and we both had our shotguns and everything, and we came outside because we thought it was a raccoon or something that was hurting, you know, our chicken. And we came outside and saw Lonely Boy across the fence in our neighbor's yard, and he was bashing himself across against the fence, trying to get back over to us because it was dark and he couldn't see the fence. And we were trying to figure out how he even got out there, and we couldn't figure out how he got out there. And so I talked to my son. I wish I hadn't have done that now, but I talked my son into raising up the fence so that Lonely Boy could come out and he could get back on our side of the fence. So my son did. And I remember my son saying, "Mom, you might want to make sure that the shotgun's, pointed that way," And at this point, I thought maybe it was a raccoon or something that got him, or a fox. So he got over to us, and he ran behind me. And I remember him, it was very dark, but we had our flashlights on, and I remember him looking up at me like, "Yeah, no, you're not going to do anything. You're not going to help me." So then he ran up underneath the porch. And me and my son looked at each other like, what the heck was that about? And right at that point, probably about 2 feet over my head was all of a sudden this really low growl. I have never heard a growl like that, especially one coming so far over my head. And we just looked at each other, even though we both had shotguns in our hands, and we just ran into the house. And once we got into the house, it was like all hell broke loose out here. Like there were 2 or 3 of them out here. They were howling, they were snarling. We could hear them. And then I realized that we had a problem. We sat down as a family and tried to discuss it and tried to think of how we can figure out what this animal is, because at this point, we weren't sure what it was. You know, do we have a bear? Is it a coyote? What is it? You know, we were trying to figure it out. And probably, you know, we just thought that it was just an animal that we could describe. That we knew, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we had any clue at that point what was going on.
No.
A lot of noise and something not good.
And then, then it started banging on the side of the house, or they started banging on the house. We would be woken up in the middle of the night, just bam, 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 and usually it was three, bam, bam, bam. So it got to the point where, you know, at first we thought it was neighbors that were messing with us because we'd only been living here for about 2 years. And then we finally went on the offensive and we took our guns out with us. We were actually, you know, walking around with, you know, AR-15s because we're like, we're not messing around. What is this thing? And I remember, gosh, there must have been a couple dozen times that we did that. And when we would come out, we would hear something, like something would run along the side of the house and run to the back of the yard. We had a wooden fence in the back of the yard that we could literally hear them jump onto the fence, and you could hear the ding-ring of the fence as it was going. We heard them land, and then we heard them running down the driveway of our neighbor's driveway, and we were like, what animal could do something like that? It's almost like a human being, but I don't know of any human being that runs that fast and covers that much, you know, ground within, I mean, we're talking about seconds from the time we walked out until the time they jumped over the fences. It was almost like they were toying with us.
Yeah, well, there's definitely more than one, because they couldn't be that fast to go from one side of the yard to the other. Just, I don't think it would be possible. They're definitely pretty fast.
So there was another instance that really helped solidify, and that was my son would come home at work from class. He would take night classes, so sometimes he would come home at like 10 o'clock, and he would always park down below the driveway because we always left in the morning and he didn't want to block us. So he would park down that way and then he would walk up. So being a mom, I used to wait for him to come home. And I remember one night hearing him come home, and I heard him walk by the bedroom window because my bedroom window was right next to the driveway. And I heard him walk by the bedroom window, and then a couple, I don't know, about 30 seconds later, he walked back down. And I was like, oh no, we must have locked the door and he's going to get his key or he's going in through the basement, right? So I got up real quick because I was going to holler at him, hey, I'm home, you know, I'm up, so you can come in. And I was going to let him in the back door. And when I got into the kitchen, he was standing in the kitchen petting the dogs. And I just stood there looking at him, and he's like, Mom, what's wrong? I was like, how are you here? Just 2 seconds, never mind. So I went back to bed and I couldn't figure it out. And it was after the Lonely Boy thing that, you know, we started talking about stuff. So I started talking to him about it, and I told him what I'd heard, and that kind of really freaked me out and freaked him out, because obviously something had been walking behind him, something that was bipedal. I never really paid attention to that word until we started researching this, and, you know, walking on 2 legs, and walked back down the driveway after he was safely in the house. So that's when I was like, hey, we really have something here. So I went to Greg and tried to tell Greg about it, and he didn't really.
Yeah, I wasn't really a believer. I was like, yeah, it's probably a raccoon.
Yeah, we kept coming back to the raccoon thing, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
And then it was probably, I would say, I don't know, it was about 6 months later We had gotten a trail cam. I decided, you know what, I need proof. I need proof of what this thing is because it's driving us nuts. It's banging on the house. It's keeping us up. It's basically harassing us, right? And we were all on edge. And you know, as a family, we were kind of, you know, almost fighting with each other about this thing and not knowing what it was. So I said, I'm getting a trail cam. So I started setting the trail cam up around the yard. And what I would do was I would set it up, and then I would come home from work after making dinner and everything, and I would check out any pictures that we had. So this one time I was sitting there, usually it was like pictures of birds and, you know, things like that. And then I started getting some really weird pictures. Like I got a picture of something, you couldn't really tell what it was, but in the background you could tell that there was sky, but it almost looked like something that ran by the camera really fast, and it had a hairy back. And when I saw that, I was like, well, what do we have around here that's as taller than me that has a hairy back, you know? And then the next couple days, I got a pair of pictures that we used to have chickens in a chicken coop to the back of our property. And we'd have to go out and put them up at night. We let them free range once we got home and let them out. And then we'd go and put them up. Well, when we put them up, we'd have to go and we'd have to put some bricks in front of their doors so that, you know, critters couldn't get to them. And so I had the trail camera on that kind of, I don't know why I had it pointed that way. I'd just randomly been pointing it in different directions. But the first picture I had, I almost deleted because I didn't really know it was really anything. And it showed like these two, I want to say eyes. There were two eyes up on top. And my husband was coming and putting the chickens up. So he was like walking next to it. And so he put the chickens up. And then the next picture was really what caught my eye because it made me realize, hey, we've got something here. And you could tell that when he walked away, so you can see him in the picture, you can see him walking away from where he was just at, and whatever it was, the eyes that were watching him from on top of the chicken coop, all of a sudden had lifted their heads up like they were watching him walk away. So the first picture is of the creature or whatever it is kind of hunkering down like, oh no, here he comes. And then the next one was it picking up its head and watching him walk away. And that really scared me because he was literally within inches of this thing. So I tried to get him to look at the pictures, and at first he wouldn't look at it. He didn't want to hear anything about it, you know. So my daughter was there, and she was looking at the pictures, and she finally said, hey, you really need to come and see these pictures because there's something there. And if you lighten up the picture a little bit, you could see that it's a big canine type head. And there was nothing behind the chicken coop that anything could stand on. There was nothing for it to lean against. Whatever was there was a lot bigger than my husband, and he was within inches of it. So you want to tell him how you thought about it?
Well, yeah, I fought it off for a while. They were saying, oh, it's this and that. And I said, no, it's definitely a raccoon or something, because you could kind of see the eyes on top of the roof and see me in the picture. So when I looked at the second one and took a closer look, I think she did lighten it up a little bit. And then I was like, oh boy, I don't know what that is. Because you could see it actually, his eyes were positioned here, and then in the second photo, it moved. And it was like looking looking at me.
And you could see the snout, and you could see how it was glaring towards where he was going.
It was pretty obvious whatever it was watching me. So I was pretty on board at that point. Something was running around, making noise.
Then, unbeknownst to me, my son had been talking to the late, great Linda Godfrey. And so he finally came to me and he was talking about, I think that we have this thing called the Dogman. And I had never heard of the Dogman. I grew up in Michigan. I never heard of the Dogman, So I was just like, what is that? No, that's not what it is. We can still explain it, Maybe a coyote got up there. I don't know. So I finally started doing research on it. we still had the bangings, we still had stuff going on. I would catch the glimpse of something and then it was gone. You know, just really weird things that were going on. Things that, things were missing in the yard, like the dog toys came up missing, but then the next day they would be back, and it was just weird little things like, who's messing with us? Who's doing this? And I finally broke down and called Linda Godfrey, and I was talking to her about it. And she told me, she said, you have a Dogman. This is what they do. This is how they terrorize people. I was afraid to go out of my house. I mean, to this day, I'm afraid to go out at night. You know, when I'm home alone, I do not go out. I don't even take the dogs out. You know, if they bark, I'm jumpy. If we hear a knock or anything, I'm really jumpy. It's almost like, you know, I don't know, PTSD or something, but, you know, I'm really afraid, you know, because with seeing these things and the encounters that we've had, they're just so fast. And actually, I had described to Linda how we'd walked out and we'd walked in like a tripod, you know, formation around the yard, and she said, stop doing that. That's what they want you to do. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I must have talked to her like 8 times. And she was going to come out, but she was sick at that time, so she couldn't come out. And she said that they're playing with you. They want to see these reactions with you. It's, you know, to me, it was like cryptid ding dong ditch, you know, they're knocking on the door and then running away. And when I realized that, and then she said something that I will never forget, because I almost dropped the phone. And I almost told him for the 10th time that we're moving, we're getting out of here. She said, the guns won't do you any good. And I said, what do you mean? You know, they sure do make me feel good when I'm walking around the yard. And she said, if they wanted to kill you, they would have done it by now. And then I realized she was right. They were so fast, they were so quick, they were so quiet. They could be right next to me and I wouldn't even know they were there. So then we started like non-reacting. You know, if the banging was happening on the house, we no longer went running around like chickens with our heads cut off. And eventually that part of it kind of died away. But then we had the other encounters as well. That winter, again, I was home alone. And I remember I was doing work, and it was about 10, 11 o'clock at night. And I was sitting at the kitchen table. And we had a deck then. We've since torn out our deck, but anyway. And I was sitting at the kitchen table and I heard this thump. This like something jumping off the roof onto the deck, which was very commonplace. They used to get on our roof and make all kinds of noise and stuff like that. So I was kind of used to that, but I was home alone, so I got scared. And my son was away in college. And so I called him on the phone, and I was telling him about, you know, what I'd heard. And he's like, well, don't go outside, Mom. Don't go by the windows. You know what to do. Don't let them bother you. They're just messing with you. So, I was standing next to the kitchen window looking out by our sink. And that night I remember very distinctly, we had just had a snowfall. So it was beautiful out, and I don't know whether it was a full moon, but if it wasn't, it was very clear. It was almost like daylight. I could see daylight. And I could see into the neighbor's drive. And as I'm talking to my son, I'm like watching something that I thought was a man, and it was running back and forth in the driveway. But the way it was running, it was like it was reaching down and trying to catch something, like something was running from it. And so I was sitting there, and I remember I kept saying, what is that? What is that? And I'd forgotten that I was talking to my son on the phone until I heard, Mom, what's going on? And I said, oh, I'm really sorry. So I explained to him what was happening. I said, it's running back and forth, and I must have watched it and talked to him for over 20 minutes. And you would have thought that I would have, since I had my cell phone in my hand, would have started a video or something, but for some reason my mind didn't even go there. I was like just watching this thing, like, what is that? And I could tell pretty early on that it wasn't a man, because it was just running too weird and it was too fast. I mean, it was going from one end of the driveway to where I could see it in the other within a second. I mean, I've never seen anybody run that fast. And at times it seemed like it had dropped down on all fours and then it popped back up. And so my son's like, Mom, don't go outside, don't go outside. So finally it went away. And so I went to bed, and it was probably, I think it was about midnight. But I told myself, the next day was, I think it was a Saturday, and I had the day off. And I told myself, you know, I was praying, please don't let it snow, because whatever was out there, I know there's going to be prints if it just doesn't snow over the prints. So I went out first thing in the morning. I left the dogs in the house, and I went into the neighbor's, property, and I found prints, and I found a lot of prints. I wish I knew what I knew now back then, because I would have tried to probably cast some of it, but I did take pictures, and the only thing I knew to judge the size of it was using my hand. So I put my hand down next to these prints, and those prints, they were like this big. They were huge. And then I had a black lab that was like 70 pounds. So I came back and found his prints in the yard and took pictures of his prints to kind of compare it to, like, this is a 70-pound lab that has a footprint like this, and what is this thing, But that kind of, right then and there, I knew, yes, we have a Dogman. I've seen it. And that pretty much solidified what we had.
Liberty's our black German Shepherd. She's a German Shepherd. She's pretty sensitive and to all the happenings. So we always kind of get a feel if there's something happening by her. But one night, I don't know how long, maybe a year-ish. Anyway, so she wanted to go outside, so I let her out the back door. And she goes up the yard, and so I'm about 15 feet out of the house, and she comes tearing back down and zips by me and runs in the house. And so I look back, and then as I look up where she came from, I see something. And I'm saying, oh man, I can see the shape of it, and it was gray, and it was tall, but I couldn't get any distinct features, but I thought real quick, gosh, should I go get my gun? And as I did that, it kind of like moved, like I could barely see it, and like it went to all fours and then was gone. This was in like split seconds, because the dog went by, I looked up, saw it, and then thought for a second, and I thought I heard a little bit of noise, but so I was standing there just like scratching my head, and so I go back inside, and Carrie sees me, and she goes, "What?" I said, "I don't know." She goes, "Well, what do you mean?" And so I tried to explain it. She goes, "Well, what did you see?" And I said, "Not really sure." I know it was big and tall, and fast, but it was like you could kind of make it out. It almost seemed like once it noticed me noticing it was gone. Like it didn't expect me to actually be able to see it. But yeah, I didn't really know how to explain it to Carrie, and she says, "Well, that's pretty much." So I don't know. I know they're extremely fast because it was gone in a blink. So
I was very excited about him having that encounter, because now I wasn't in a place all by myself. It was like almost a aha moment for him. So I think that was the beginning of when he really started to realize that, hey, we've got something that's kind of coming around, and I don't know, it was just scary.
Can't really be
very
an
scary.
Too much longer after that, because that was pretty clear. It wasn't our neighbor standing up there.
Yeah, we actually had, me and Greg and Drew, my son, we actually had conversations about who the werewolf was in the neighborhood. We couldn't figure it, And then again, my son and I were doing all kinds of research and hearing all these other things that, similar to what we were going on. So that helped me a little bit, because I really thought I was losing my mind. It was just very scary. And for the longest time, Over 10 years, really. Other than some close friends, we really didn't talk about it. We didn't, want people to think we were those people that, that had a screw loose or anything. So it's just probably within the last 5 years that we've come out with telling our stories. And we've got a lot of them. All right, so I'm gonna show you my Jeep. I'll show you the first print that I ever noticed, and it's right over here. It's right there. And if you see, you can't rub it off. I've waxed it. I've put all kinds of cleaning supplies on there. You can see where the palm is. You can see it's a whole lot bigger than my hand, or a whole lot smaller than my hand. You can see there's 5 digits, and then the palm. So that was the first one I saw. So there is it's kind of, it's better if it's cloudy a little bit because it's kind of bright. So I'll put my shadow here. So if you can see this, there's actually 2 prints here that are kind of overlaid onto themselves that I noticed. So there's these, and again, they won't come off no matter what I do. But it's like you can see my fingerprints leave markings, but then I can wipe them off. These ones, I can't wipe off. They will not wipe off. So when I first noticed them, I noticed that they were real greasy, and I tried, wiping stuff off, and it was like a real thick kind of grease. So I don't know what they have on their hands, but it doesn't do well with my paint on my Jeep or the plastic. But then here's a bunch of them here.
Oh yeah.
And you can see the handprint, and then I'm going to open the door when you get There's smudge marks here, and that's from them. This one's this year's, because that wasn't here. So I think that is actually a fingerprint. I had a friend who was a police officer who was going to come out and fingerprint and see, with his fingerprint kit, but then he never made it out, so. We did find another encounter in our town it was called Silver Creek. And when I encountered that, I started thinking about how they would move and how because we're we're rural, but we have close neighbors. So to think about like anything like a Dogman or a Bigfoot being so close to such a community, to me just didn't make any sense, because aren't those things supposed to be out in like the Rockies and things like that? And here we are in, a very rural area. So we started actually hiking back into the back of our property. At one point I did find some footprints and I did cast them, but then I broke the cast. So I was new at that. So, but I think that they use, a lot of the trees. I think, they use, the trees for camouflage. Sometimes we've had, encounters during the day, but mostly it's during dusk. It's either dusk or it's late at night. I just had that one encounter early in the morning that I had in the beginning, but after that, and that one, I think with looking back, I think that it was trying to get my dogs thinking that it was an animal that was hurt and trying to lure them away so it could eat them. Honestly, that's what I think it was. But, I did research on the limestone caves that we have here. And, I know a lot of people with the Silver Creek sightings, some of their comments online were like, oh, there's no place for them to hide. We don't have mountains. We don't have this. We have a lot of caves. And the limestone caves are all, closed down for some reason. Nobody wants to talk about it, so that was something that I started delving into. And what I found was the more I wanted to talk to people about it, the more people shut up and wouldn't talk to me. They didn't want to talk about those caves. So I think there might be something there, but for the most part, I think they stay to the wood lines. I think that they might travel the streams and rivers that we have here. They don't leave a whole lot of footprints from what we've seen. We've seen tracks in the snow in our yard, and I've got pictures of them that are over 3 or 4 feet long, where my son and Greg have been walking next to them, and it's almost 2 whole strides of theirs to the one, you know, but that's very few and far between. I don't know if now, since they know that we know about them and nothing has happened, maybe they feel that we're not a threat to them. But as far as where they come from, I don't know. I know that they come during certain times, usually from April through May, we see them, and then again in the fall. So where they go during the summertime, I don't know, because we generally don't have encounters in the middle of the summer. We did have a couple encounters in Hocking Hills, though, which was very weird because we had gotten a camper in Hocking Hills so that we could get away from these things. And then we had 2 encounters there. So, you know, what's up with that? You know, I've heard from doing the research that they talk to each other and they communicate with each other. And they were like, you know, maybe the ones in Hocking Hill were like, oh, that's Carrie and Greg. Let's just kind of say hi. I don't know. But I do know in the beginning it was really scary. You know, now it's still scary, but we've kind of learned to live with it, if that makes sense.
Stay tuned for more exclusive content right here on Exposing the Strange.